So are you using your battery tender on your new 23 or 24 touring bike? With this new infotainment system and all the electronics in this bike, you need to be using a tender. You want to see a green light indicating a fully charged battery at all times. So if you're not riding, be charging. So if you've not hooked up your tender yet, or you can't locate it, it's probably behind this side cover. So you'll remove your saddlebag and then you can pop this cover off. There are 3 connection points, so grab at the bottom, grab at the right corner, grab at the left corner, it'll come off. You'll find your tender wrapped around your fuse box and in this connector. Now in my case, I removed the seat. So I took the seat off, 2 screws in the back, took the seat off, and I fed my wire through one of the holes in the frame here. So on the old bikes, the coil was back here in the back of the bike, and the spark plug wires ran up along the frame. And there was little clips here to hold those spark plug wires in place. On the 23.5s, those little clips are still there. So I use it to hold my tender cover when I'm riding. I've noticed on the 24 CVOs, those little clips are still there, but on the 24 Street Glide and Road Glide, they're gone. But it's still a great option. Just feed the little tender through that hole and then just plug it in and let it dangle there. You can actually just shove it back up in that hole if you like, and then pull it out when you need it. This is a great place to store the tender. Many of folks are putting it outside of this cover. So they feed it under the seat over this cover. First of all, it's ugly. You have to look at it. But it rubs. As you're riding, that little tender cover rubs against the plastic and it will mar this paint. Many of us like to use our bikes as a source of music when hanging out in the garage. It is a decent stereo system, so why not listen to it while you're hanging out? So you'll turn your bike on in accessory mode and it'll start to boot the bike without turning the ignition on. We still get the running lights and the tail lights, I think, which is unfortunate because it's using quite a bit of voltage. So if you look at my tender here, it is solid amber, which means right now it's charging the bike. If I turn the accessory mode on by holding the trip switch down, the bike will begin to boot. But notice that my charger now indicates that it is not charging. So it is blinking, which means no charge is being sent to the bike. I am 100% on battery. On the 2024 models, it continues to charge. So they rerouted how that tender cable routes in the bike so it goes directly to the battery and allows it to continue to charge when you're in accessory mode. Unfortunately, with the 23.5 CVOs, for whatever reason, Harley decided to run that tender through the parts and accessory relay. I'm really not sure why they did this. So unfortunately now when you put your bike in accessory mode, the relay shuts off the tender and it no longer charges. Now, whether you have a 24 or 23.5 and you're using your bike for music, you still need to be careful with the voltage on the battery. Depending on your tender, you likely do not have enough amperage to keep the bike going forever, and eventually the battery will begin to drain. So Harley put some safety mechanisms in these bikes. So as your battery voltage begins to drain, it will actually limit the volume of your stereo. And some of you have run into this where you think your speakers aren't working, but it's really that your battery had drained so low that it was limiting the volume of your system. So what if you're a 23.5 owner and you want to run your stereo in the garage? Well, you can certainly run off the battery, and then as soon as you put it out of accessory mode, it'll begin to charge. You may have to wait quite some time before that charge gets up to green again, but you certainly can just run it down in your garage, enjoy the music, and then make sure you don't need to go for a ride immediately because you'll need to charge that battery. But I bet if you dig around in your cables and you find the box that your tender came in, you'll find this. So this is an SAE connector to the standard alligator clamps. So you can connect this directly to a battery and charge it with your tender. And the idea is that if you took the battery out of the bike, you could maintain the charge on the battery. But you could also consider connecting this to your bike instead of using the tender that's connected to the bike and instead go directly to the battery. So you could remove your seat. Unfortunately, you got to remove the BCM, and then you would connect these guys directly to the battery posts. One thing I recently learned is if you take your seat off and you take the BCM out to access the battery and you turn the bike on, the bike is going to give you a tip sensor. It's going to think that the bike is tipped over. Well, it's actually because you probably pulled the BCM out and you laid the BCM over the bike, so the bike thinks it's tipped over. The BCM has to be laid flat in the bike to avoid that sensor from tripping. So I had a viewer reach out and said, hey, why don't you just connect it to your starter? And that way when you have it in accessory mode, it would continue to charge. So I thought about it and I said, that should work, right? So when you go to jumpstart a bike, a lot of people will mess with removing the seat, the BCM to get to the battery terminals. But what you can do is connect to your starter, because your starter is connected directly to the battery. So there's actually a cover here on your starter, a little rubber boot. And if you pull that off, that cable there goes directly to the positive terminal on your battery. So if you connect the positive alligator clip to this terminal, and then you find a ground for the other one and connect this to your tender, it will charge. And if you're jump starting a battery using one of those battery packs, you would do the same thing. So you connect the positive on the starter and then find a ground to jump start the bike. So this ought to work for a battery tender as well. So here's our starter motor, and here's the cover to the positive cable that goes directly to the battery. And then right underneath it, there's a bolt sticking out a post. And it has the ground cable to the starter, which also goes to the ground on the battery. So that's a great place for a ground, and there's our positive. So when you're connecting these cables, you want to connect the positive first, then the negative, and then when you're removing them, you want to remove the negative, then the positive. So we'll connect our positive right here to the starter. It's very accessible, so we can get a great connection on that, right on the bolt. And then the negative is going to be a little bit harder because it's a bit of a digging here to get to that battery post. Okay, so now we have the positive connected and the ground connected to that little bolt post down there. And so we're fully connected. We will now use the SAE side. So this will plug in just like it normally would. And now the battery tender is going directly to the battery and not through that part and accessory relay. So when we put the bike in accessory mode, it will continue to charge. Again, if you were jump starting a bike, these are the same two connections. So you'd have your little battery booster here, connect it to those two spots, and then attempt to start your bike. So now when we put the bike in accessory mode, by holding down the trip switch, we can see that the amber light remains solid. So it's continuing to charge the battery even though the bike is on. So again, for the 24s, this is the behavior you should be seeing because they changed the wiring to run the tender directly to the battery. But for whatever reason on the 23.5s, they ran it through that parts and accessory relay. So here's an alternative to get around that and use your bike for music in the garage for an extended period of time. The Harley branded tenders are actually made by Noco. And you may be familiar with that company. They make battery packs and all kinds of chargers for cars and motorcycles. So this charger that's Harley branded is the same as the Noco version. I highly recommend you seek the 5 amp version. Now Harley will put these on sale, sometimes during the holidays. And Amazon will put the Noco versions on sale, especially on Prime Day. I will put a link in the description for the Amazon Noco version, which is my affiliate link. So that means if you click that link and purchase one, it costs you nothing, uses your Amazon account, but gives me a little commission referring to the product to you. So I really appreciate your support there. It does help me out. So if you're not using your tender cable, you need to fish it out of this cover and start using it. Every time you get back from a ride, plug this in. Keep your battery fully charged. It will last significantly longer, and it's more likely to start the bike when you're ready to go for a ride. So I hope you found this information useful, and if you did, you'll go share it with someone else. But until next time, in the friction zone.